Okay, by way of moving into our program, I'd like to introduce Bryant Santana. As I think everybody kind of got the impression, he actually works for Raytheon. you might have missed that, but and his team is required to be here, yeah. And for those of you who don't know, Raytheon, of course, is one of the major defense contractors. So when Brian is talking about cybersecurity, you're talking about Defense Department levels of cybersecurity. So this isn't like CVS. You know? This is a whole different level. In terms of background, the primary thing I get about Brian is high energy. The man plays lacrosse. He plays lacrosse semi-pro. He played lacrosse, I think, from grade school on. I would watch out if the man has a stick in his hand. You're not going to outrun him. And his degree is from Florida Southern College, where he played lacrosse. With that, Brian, I'd like to turn it over to you. And I've got your presentation on the screen, and you'll have to tell me when you want slides moved.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Casey, for the kind introduction, and hello, fellow Rotarians, and thank you for joining me today for this presentation. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Yep. Perfect. Just to go ahead and get started, just to give again some background, I work for Raytheon. I'm a Rotarian. I was initiated here in Central Florida. Go ahead and, Casey, go ahead and select the next slide, please.
Well, page down, isn't it? Yeah.
And do that. Oh. Let's see if it's got a place to go somewhere.
Should be able to just click.
It could be. Their glasses on here.
Okay, we're gonna tech support just moved in.
Tech support's moving in.
Just go ahead and click through.
If we can find the one we need to be doing here. Hang on 1 second.
No problem.
Yeah.
That's the one I was on.
That's the one we should be on. Okay. But we need to be able to get to that one.
Hey, if it helps, I can share my desktop. I have it right here, and then I can click through.
Okay, that would be good. Yeah, Mike, if you take
see
over.
if you can do something with it, because I don't know why we can't.
So let's stop sharing, and then Mike can share.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you do that? I did. Did you hit page down last time?
Yeah, I did.
Well, it works now.
Okay, go for it.
We got it.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. So yes, again, just to briefly qualify, my name is Bryant Santana. I'm CompTIA Security Plus certified. That's an industry standard for security certifications. We've got about going on to 3 years to 4 years of professional IT experience. Again, I work for Raytheon as a cyber threat web application security analyst, and again, I was initiated with the Rotary Club in Orlando back in January of 2021. I had the privilege of visiting West Austin's Rotary Club back in June for a lacrosse event for my semi-pro team, and I had a chance to connect with Mike, Casey, and everyone else. It's so nice to see familiar faces once again. And to go from there, we'll go ahead and switch over to our next slide. We'll go ahead and save our questions for the end. To begin, I found a lot of times folks, when they want to define cybersecurity, it's rather challenged just to actually get a single definition. What is cybersecurity? Took the time to categorize and label as the definition, as you can see in front of you, the measures and controls that ensures security objectives of information system assets. Overall, that's an overall definition. To cover the main points for cybersecurity, we're looking to monitor the controls of our systems and our assets. And to transition over to our next slide, why small businesses need to take cybersecurity seriously. Small businesses are less prone to sustaining damages and or the extra costs that are associated with the large business. From a hacker's point of view, we're going to have small businesses essentially have more data than individuals. However, they're going to be generally less secure than large businesses, larger enterprises. And so the focus here is, I want to again emphasize, is of course is the cost. The cybersecurity incident is going to affect the small business much more than a large organization. To transition over to our next slide, we're going to see here, go ahead. I went ahead and added go ahead. Oops. One more back, please. So I went ahead and added a report from the IBM security in terms of cost of a data breach. And this quote kind of resonated with me well, and overall identifying why in modern day so much emphasis has been put in security. And again, as we can read through here, we're seeing that small businesses face, disproportionately larger costs relative to larger organizations. IBM security report found that significant variation in total data cost by organizational size. So the cost for large organizations, those with 25,000 employees, averaged about $5.11 million, which is roughly equates to about $204 for an employee. However, for a smaller organization with less employees, looking at the range of 500 to 1,000, we're looking at has an average cost of $2.65 million, which is roughly going to equate to about $3,533 per employee. And so we can see that smaller organizations are going to have a much higher cost relative to their size than large organizations, which is definitely going to hamper their ability to recover financially from the incident. Casey, go ahead. Click the next slide, please. Through these slideshows, I just wanted to make note that I have some notes that can be available. And transitioning over is, what prevents, again, small businesses from investing in cybersecurity. A lot of things that look into from responses found on research is the price of cybersecurity appliances. There's unfortunately an ignorance in the importance of cybersecurity practices, and we're looking to have an overwhelm with many things, and cybersecurity is not on their high priority. A lot of businesses have different costs to associate with and cover, and fortunately, cybersecurity isn't the top of the budget, and so that's where hackers and for folks with malicious intent sees to capitalize and take advantage of that. To go ahead and transition to our next slide, I just got another chart here, just so folks we can get a glance at the global side of things. As we can see here, the sample size here found is the average time for a breach. That's one thing to notate, is the average time of the breach is about 206 days from when it occurred. And, to contain the breach, we're looking at another average of 73 days. So this is a lot of just time where companies are, going to really need to realize that they're losing money, and especially having associated costs with security. We're going to go ahead and transition over to our next slide and say what are options, small businesses can take in order to protect their own cyberspace. And so we're going to start with protecting our network. That's really important to have. Starters, we want to evaluate our assets. We're looking at hardware, which would be your physical device, your physical computer. We have software, which is the programs that run inside your computer. We're looking at wanting to segment our network in order to prevent access control into these segments. So over here, we want to install appliances, apps in the network that are going to monitor and provide access control, and look at things such as your firewalls, your network security, that kind of sort. And we also want to have what is called and referred to as an intrusion detection system, and as well as an intrusion prevention system. And these are just fancy words just to understand. We're looking at for an IDS, is for short for the intrusion detection system. We're looking at protecting the firewall. We're looking at detecting. Essentially, it's going to identify any threat hunters, any threats to the system. However, the difference with the intrusion prevention system is there will actually be an action taken by the device. So that's the main difference, is the detection will just give an alert for the system's admin or whomever. However, the intrusion prevention system is going to actually take steps to mitigate those risks. And, we also want to make sure we have a network antivirus installed within our network. So go ahead and transition to our next slide, please. Important to secure our Wi-Fi. It's very important to follow this concept and to these principles, because this is going to limit the type of damage that can be occurred to your organization. So one thing to emphasize here out of this is, of course, look at your policies for your Wi-Fi. Make sure that the password changes are frequently. Every once, I'd say a recommendation, at least once a year. When I say frequently, changing over time. And we want to limit the range of our Wi-Fi. We don't want to have Wi-Fi expanding into areas that may not be a part of the business or your home. We want to limit that access, and that can be controlled. Switching over to our next slide here, we're going to look at a couple steps here we can take. Is we can actually physically make sure we're moving the router to a physically secured location. We don't want to have our router to be anywhere near public access. We want to make sure we're putting in a locked room, locked door, not easily accessible to anyone that's not authorized to be there. We always want to make sure we're changing our default passwords. We want to make sure we're not using the same default password that was configured with our devices. I know a lot of times a lot of folks want to use or leave the password the same. They see a certain password, it looks secure, and what they don't realize is oftentimes these passwords could be found in manuals. They can be found online. If the default password is still the password being used, you're essentially allowing a vulnerability, for someone to come in and take over your network, give them access when you don't want them to. Of course, we want to make sure we're changing our network names. We're changing them from the basic standard, ATT ... jumble of letters, rather instead change it to something, maybe for the business, Fred and Sue's Bikes, that kind of thing. That would limit someone with the intent to hack, their understanding of what is available. Oftentimes, a lot of hackers would like to conduct reconnaissance and see what kind of passwords, what kind of devices folks are using, and if their device is on the network of the default name, it makes it a lot easier for them to do what they want to do. We want to make sure we're conducting our updates. We want to make sure we're updating our firmware, our software at all times. When you get that notification to ask if you would like to do an update, take the 2 minutes, restart your device, run through the update. There's patches being installed that are going to prevent other hackers from coming into your system. So it's up to you as the user to protect yourself, make sure you conduct all your updates, even if it's a couple minutes, let that go through. We're going to turn off our WPS, which is our Wi-Fi protected. And that's essentially it's to limit, it's a weak encryption standard of security. It's very easy to break through. We want to make sure we have that off. However, we want to make sure that our WPA, Wi-Fi protected access 2, is the strongest available encryption standard for our Wi-Fi, and we want to make sure that is on. Okay. We want to also make sure we're identifying any rogue access points. Give a very good example of a rogue access point is, for example, when you're at a hotel or out traveling and you're sitting at the airport and you'll turn on your Wi-Fi, you'll see that there's an airport 2 Wi-Fi or airport 3 Wi-Fi. Well, if you're not able to verify with the airport, for example, what is their Wi-Fi or their hotel, you could be actually signing on to someone else's own access point who could have malicious intent, and you won't even know it because oftentimes they disguise these access points to be something that users will trust when they see right away. And so we want to make sure we have set up our public and private access for businesses. So we want to have, if we're going to give out Wi-Fi to our clientele, we want to make sure that we are setting up a separate network, segment our networks from the private side to the public side. That way, folks who need to have access to the private network are able to, and securely able to do so. If you'd like to go ahead and find additional resources, there's a click on this link on this PowerPoint later on, and there's a setup from the exact CISA, which is the Government's Association in terms of security and technology. Go ahead and click there for more. Thank you, Casey. Next slide. If you can click the next slide, please. Thank you. Oops. Okay, right here. Thank you. So for mobile devices, we want to make sure that we understand that nowadays mobile devices are becoming an Achilles heel in cyberspace. Nowadays, hackers are using mobile devices as an option, another means to access network they would not normally have access to. So we want to make sure that we're limiting our mobile devices access in our networks. We want to make sure, if possible, limit the access to just the business network for personal mobile devices. We want to make sure that we are monitoring that and securing ourselves. Of course, just make sure it's always better to have mobile devices connecting to a controlled network and have very strict access control policies. And of course, things like two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication are very excellent security practices to have. A lot of times when you set up your email, when you set up profiles, they'll ask you if you'd like to set up or enable multi-factor authentication. It's one of the best preventative measures you can take, and doing so will ensure your security. Go ahead and switch over to the next slide, please. We want to make sure we're looking at our host. So our host is just any devices that are part of our network, our printer, our keyboards, our devices, IoT of things, to smart refrigerators. I see folks are starting to get purchased these days. We want to make sure that also, while we're looking at our host, we're looking at getting rid of devices that have old operating systems. Some of you may use computers that run on operating systems such as, Windows XP or, Windows Vista, Windows 98, that kind of thing. You don't want to generally be operating on those because patches are no longer being made for those operating systems. We want to make sure we are continuously using the latest and greatest technology if possible, when possible. And always make sure we're conducting our updates. We want to make sure that once Microsoft or whomever puts out that the software has reached the end of their life cycle, we're no longer using those. Highly recommend to also invest in an antivirus or even a security suite. A lot of times antiviruses are going to be very effective in helping protect your network, just because it's going to already have, there's a database of all these codes out there that will essentially, let you know when something's a virus, for example, has been detected, and it'll take measures in preventing damage to your network. Let's go ahead and switch over to our next slide. And we want to make sure we're backing up our data. So, security, it's important to always, of course, handle attacks, but at the same time, one thing we always want to consider when devices fail, devices aren't always going to work, but we always want to make sure we're prepared for when they do. So having backups and having disk images, essentially performing a backup on both your local services and your local servers on the cloud and the cloud, we will be able to, protect our data that way. In case many of you may know, we have many instances of ransomware nowadays, where a lot of companies, I'm sure if you guys have been following on the news, have received a lot of damage. And because, if you have a backup of your data that's routinely done, you likely wouldn't have to pay that large fine. That's one of those, preventative measures you can always take. So having those routine backups are very important. Let's go ahead and switch, Casey. we want to make sure we're looking at to authenticate and you have authorized users. Again, as mentioned, I want to drive the point of multi-factor authentication. Please utilize that. It's an incredible service. A lot of services will send you a text on your phone and ask you to confirm when you start seeing yourself having to check a text message on your device. That's definitely a good sign. That way you can monitor, if someone's trying to access your account, even while you're away from the computer. Make sure we have, strong control policies, have user authentication. Let's use the concept of least privilege. And I want to spend some time talking about the concept of least privilege and authorized users. We want to make sure that, if, for example, we have an employee that's in charge of, taking payment, we don't want that employee to also be in charge of our books. We want to make sure we're giving them only access for accepting payment, not for paying out checks or anything like that. We want to make sure we're separating. And also we want to look at is our passwords. We want to make sure we're looking at how we're going to check them, how we're grading them. A lot of times, I've even seen this myself, where small businesses will have passwords written down on sticky notes on the monitor screen. That is not good. Make sure we're using not password managers. Those are very effective in helping. Just make sure we're not leaving any exposed vulnerabilities for our perpetrators and hackers to take advantage of. So let's go ahead and switch to the next slide, please. We want to have set security policies. That's important. You always want to have those set. One thing I will emphasize is once you have former employees, look into once they just leave your organization, we want to have a policy set for when they will be no longer with the company. That way we can ensure they're being handled. A lot of times the companies may fire an employee. They could be disgruntled, and if the employee still has access to the systems we're looking at, they could potentially do damage. So one way to always do that is, remove anyone from your cyberspace before you let them go from the job. Go ahead and switch to the next slide, please, Casey. Switching over, employee training and awareness. This is probably the single most important part of this presentation. I want to drive the point, make sure that we're training our employees. We want to make sure they understand, because there is a human layer to security, and we need to make sure we're ensuring and protecting. We're having our education and training. We'll constantly have better opportunities for employees to learn more, to improve. It just takes one employee clicking on one phishing email to, allow a hacker into your network. We want to make sure we don't want to fall into any of those scenarios. Again, avoid having employees leave their passwords on a Post-it note, monitor. It's very common. Make sure that if we're clicking on any links, if you have employees clicking on links, you verify that you're expecting to have this link, that if it's something you're not expecting, don't click it. Better to not click it. And make sure that, the employee, of course, is not carrying the IP, the internet protocol of your business on a flash drive that she or he takes everywhere. We don't want to have her information running around on flash drives. There's can easily be lost, and can prevent to be dangerous. Let's go ahead and switch over to our next slide, Casey. To switch over to phishing emails. So essentially, this is the hacker's attempt to kind of go ahead. The word phishing is referring to, it's a link that when someone clicks on, you're granting access for the hacker into your network. We want to make sure that you don't click on any links you do not expect. One thing you may do if you see a link, that you may not trust or unaware, you can actually hover over it with your mouse, and you can see in smaller letters that will pop up, where's the destination intended. A lot of times what hackers would like to do, or malicious intent, they like to change the hyperlink and make it look like you're going to click on a link to go to walmart.com, but in reality, you're going to be going into a link that's going to be a malicious website, most likely, and you're going to be granting the access to that hacker. Once that link is clicked, you're essentially opening the door for that hacker to begin exploiting. The good thing is there is free training that can be found online. Trust KnowBe4. It's going to offer incredible security training. It's very, very intuitive. It's for folks that may not have the strongest computer skills, but they can have an opportunity to be tested on things such as phishing emails. We can look at things such as weak password tests. They have password exposure tests. And password exposure tests are great because, a lot of times we have these data breaches you hear about in the news. When you go ahead and put in your password, you can check to see if this is common password, if this has been used before. The weak password test, of course, will let you put in your whatever passwords you currently use, and you can see the amount of time it would take for someone to crack or break into it. And again, there's also this automated security awareness training. All these links are really useful. Highly recommend you look into them and have employees run through them and learn security. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Casey. And again, here's a little infographic. Just I know some of us are visual learners. And one thing, to kind of get the big point on phishing, I'm driving away, is, of course, make sure that as the high point up there listed, it says that phishing is the root of 95% of all successful cyber attacks worldwide. There's a reason why I really wanted to drive the point on phishing. That's a really big preventative measure you can take in stopping that from happening. So like I said, don't click any links that you're not expecting or you can't verify. If you see a link, and call. There's a phone number. Sometimes they'll have a phone number. Call it. Find out who's there, who's behind the other side. Confirm even if it's someone make sure to call them and say, if you weren't expecting an email from your colleague and you get one, but you weren't sure of it, give them a call. Find out, hey, did you send me this link? You want me to click on it? And they'll confirm. Okay, when in doubt, you can contact help. This is a Cybersecurity Optimal network. There's again another cybersecurity organization that of course can offer assistance. And again, make sure we're not looking at overseeing things. One big thing on phishing emails, a good giveaway to keep an eye out for, is looking at spelling and grammar. Throughout the email, a lot of times you might see misspelled words. Commonly spelled words, a lot of mistakes. And if it's asking for personal information, don't click on it. Don't divulge it. If the IRS, if you see an email from the IRS, it's not going to be from the IRS. The IRS knows how to get a hold of you when needed. They'll write you a letter. And especially if the sender doesn't address you by name, then definitely start having your guard up. Go ahead and switch slides, please, Casey. Some personal suggestions that I'd include too is have some DNS filtering. A lot of you guys have employees that have access to the World Wide Web, and we don't need to have our car salesmen to have open access to all sorts of networks that may not be any way related to the job. So you can limit the access they have and what domains they can access throughout the network. We want to make sure that we're preventing files that could contain scripting. They have there's old Office files, right? There's old scripts. We don't want those running that scripts. And again, for those of you that may not know scripts, we're just looking at it's a program that will execute just through the code on the line when it's inputted in a field for a website. Of course, we want to look at the cost of cybersecurity tools are expensive. Well, let's look at the free ones. Okay, they usually are limited in functionality. However, they are still better than having nothing. And that's where, again, I recommend going on sites like KnowBe4. Again, they have tons of great resources. And that, be careful, of course, be wary of which, resources you see out there for free. If someone's offering a free software, look into it, see what other folks are commenting, look who's offering it, do your due diligence and making sure you're trusting who's going to do that for you. And go ahead and change slides, Casey. So a lot of times, a lot of folks will ask me about passwords. Everyone wants to know, well, is the password I'm using effective? Go ahead and change slides, Casey. So I want to spend some time on choosing our passwords. A lot of us have a hard time remembering passwords. Sometimes we have different passwords for different, the accounts, things like that. So one thing I want you to take away is always, use a lengthy password. We don't want to have passwords that are, shortened characters. We don't want 3 or 4 or 5 words, for a password. We want to have, an added, at least, 6 to honestly more than 8. If you can get to 10, that would be great. I'm going to show you some techniques that will help you later on in terms of choosing passwords that are going to be effective and secure. So one thing to also keep in mind too is, use easy to remember phrases. I'm going to go a little deeper into that in my next slide. We want to make sure we're mixing our uppercase or lowercase letters or digits or symbols. We're changing that up. We don't want to be using all lowercase or just one capital letter and then the rest lowercase. I know it's a lot easier to do it, but let's change that up. And of course, I know this might be a challenge for some of you folks to use a different and unique password for each account. The reason I emphasize this point is because if you use the same password for every account, and it just happens to be that, some company that has your account information gets hacked, well, now these hackers have just got access to each and every one of your accounts. So if your same password is for your Gmail account is the same as your banking account, and it turns out your Gmail password was compromised and attacked, well, now the attackers also have your banking password. So it's really effective to use password managers. Okay, this is where certain devices or programs that will store passwords securely. There's definitely different ones online. Please make sure you're doing your research when doing so, but having different passwords is effective. We want to make sure we're changing our passwords frequently. We don't want to have the same password from 10 years ago. A lot of people are getting hacked because they set up an easy password back when, 10 years ago or whatever it was. And, now that they haven't changed that password at all and it got compromised, a lot of times they don't even have a solution. So make sure that, for frequently used passwords, change them more frequently, just keep them rotating and secure. Go ahead and switch to the next slide. So this is a little training. If you want to go ahead and get a quick tidbit on understanding, how can you develop a good, strong password. I'm going to teach you this very incredible concept that I was once taught. And so you could take 3 or 4, random nouns that aren't related. In this case, in this example, I used the Cowboys. It's my favorite team, the Cowboys. I took Batman, a superhero, and I chose the number 12. For whatever Tom Brady or whatever quarterback. However, when you take these 3 ideas, okay, you put them together into one phrase, okay, and you're going to go ahead and change up the characters that you're able to with different. So for every instance you have the letter O, you can replace the letter O with the number 0, okay. Now, if you have the letter S, a lot of common times you can change that for the number 5, okay. You can use the @ symbol for the letter A, change up the numbers, that kind of thing. So we went from having 3 random ideas to something that only may make sense to you, which is the point. And you've also provided yourself with the layer of security in terms of password code breakers are going to essentially look for dictionary words, so a lot of times if you just have the word Cowboys, it's going to pop up in dictionary attack, much simpler. However, if you have the jumbled up letters, the numbers and all that, it makes it much harder for password crackers to go through. Go ahead and switch to our next slide. Just to give folks a better idea of representation here, I took from NordPass, which is actually an organization that is definitely monitoring users and certain habits. And as we can see here, the most common password we're looking at is 123456. We have over 2 million users, and the time it takes to crack is less than a second. And so, as you can see down the list, we have other things, folks using the word password or easy to remember phrases like that. Well, that's, as you can see, using the word password, you have, again, over 360,000 users using it. You're not the only person if you use that, and it takes less than a second to hack. Now, I want y'all to understand that when you look at the time it takes to hack, the reason why I instructed y'all to mix the numbers and letters is because the more numbers and letters you mix, the longer it's going to take a password cracker to go through it. So mixing that up is going to extend that time for, instead of maybe less than a second, to rather 10 years to break, or sometimes even longer, the more letters you add, to give you that example. So go ahead and switch to the next slide, Casey. Please. Password managers, we're looking at password. They're definitely critical. Look at how, there's two different types. Okay, we want to be careful which ones we select. So things that we can keep in mind. So we want to look at local password managers. Okay, those are good in the sense that they're stored locally and you have the security over the storage of it. However, on a local machine, that's the only device that's going to be able to access it. When I refer to a local machine, I'm referring to devices just at your home. When I switch over to this cloud password manager, those are good too. They're easily accessible anywhere, not just your local network, not like your local area. However, if you were in one side of the country or the other, you can still access the password the same. However, this only downside is that this security is only going to be protected and it's controlled by the cloud provider. So that being Google or whomever is providing that service, it's going to be up to them to protect your passwords. So there's a double-edged sword. We want to be careful, understand our purpose and what we want to do as an organization to make that decision. Okay, go ahead and switch over, Casey. So again, here's just some quick statistics about in regards to cybersecurity. We're looking at there's an increase of attacks. Frequency is definitely going up more and more. We're reading on the news more and more companies are being attacked, whether it's ransomware or being hacked just in general. We want to notice that there's an average of those attacks that are 60% were missed by antiviruses. So a lot of times when folks set up their networks, they think that the standard Microsoft Windows Defender is good at antivirus to have. Well, as we can see, 60% of those attacks were just missed by the antiviruses. So do not think that for just installing an antivirus, you're covered and you're good to go. There's definitely a lot more attacks out there. And again, the cost is increasing so much more. And in order to, as we can see, to apply tests and deploy patches, is just taking too long for organizations. So we want to make sure that we're doing our individual part covering that. And we'll go ahead and switch over to our last slide, and I'll have just some time for questions at this time. If you have any questions, please feel free to chime in.
Hi, I have a question or a comment rather. Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you, Mike.
Hey, Bryant, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. Two things I wanted to comment on. Your talk about phishing. In my company, we take it really seriously. Our cybersecurity organization actually injects simulated emails into our environment randomly. So maybe once a month, once every couple of months, I'll get an email, and it's actually a test by our cybersecurity. And then depending how the employee reacts to it, you either get a kudos or you get a note that says, hey, you've just been phished, and then they point you to a training link. That's one thing. The other thing I wanted to show, it's a little gadget. I don't know if people can see this, but this is a USB device, memory device with a little keypad on it. And I do use a cloud-based a password manager, but there's some places, there's only one place where I have a few things, and it's on this little gadget, and it's encrypted, and I have to unlock the gadget when I plug it into the computer. So there's some things out there that are now available.
Absolutely, Mike.
Next,
Devices.
other comment?
Well, my question. I refer to passwords as password nightmare. I've got 3 or 4 pages of passwords. Why can't all the smarts in the technical field come up with a standard password like facial expression, fingerprints, or some combination so that you don't have to try to manage 40 or 50 different passwords?
Best steps I would take for managing multiple passwords, again, is using a password manager, because you can store them securely and just access them when you need to without having to remember so much.
Okay, Amy, you had a question?
Yeah, so do we need to install like an antivirus on our cell phones?
Excellent question, Amy. A lot of times, I guess a common myth is with iPhones. A lot of times folks like to believe, oh, Apple and iPhones, there's no way to get a virus. That's not true. You can get viruses for having with an iPhone or an Android. It doesn't matter. In terms of installing antiviruses, I would recommend not to for your mobile devices. However, I would be wary on certain things to make sure you're always doing your updates. Okay, you're always doing your patch management. When the phone asks to update, go ahead and give it the time to update. Make sure you're looking at the apps you're using. If you're going to download an app you've never seen before, look to see how much others downloaded. If only 5 other people downloaded it, probably not a good idea. But if there's at least, I'd say over 50,000 users with the app, you're more safer to take that bet. And that's what approach I would take, Amy.
Okay, last 2 questions will be Nancy and then Rick.
Robin,
Oh,
Hey, Brian, hi, this is Nancy. The program's overwhelming. But many times when you're asked to do a new password and they'll suggest a strong password, I've been told that that's not a good idea to accept a strong password versus making it your own.
Correct. The one thing I would recommend mostly, Nancy, is go ahead and create one how I instructed you by creating 3 random ideas. Okay, change up the numbers and letters. If you have an A, put the @ symbol, that kind of thing. If you take 3 random ideas and put it into one, no password breaker is going to know that. Much more secure than using the browser passwords that they offer. Of course, they are strong security too, but I would recommend definitely if you can make your own, stick with it.
Thank you.
Rick?
in a single account, how the hacker can get to a password. In my case, everything I have is a separate password and ID. I'm only using that password every now and then. How can they get into the account to get that password when you have to go through an ID and a password to even get to it? Because sometimes I can't get to it because I use the wrong ID. The last question, how does the ID come in as important also with the password?
A lot of our technologies offering what they see as our face verification or face IDs, where they look at your face to verify who you are. Understand initially some folks may have some concerns over using that. However, I myself personally, I use them. I find that to be secure from my side. I do recommend, when it comes to setting up your passwords, make sure that they're secure. Don't leave them written down somewhere anyone can find. That when they ask you to set up a password hint, don't choose things that are, easy for someone to learn about you. If you're going to say your granddaughter's name and year of birth, well, someone with a simple Facebook search can try and find that out. Things like that. We got to remember we're going to protect ourselves and our security.
Robin, is it a quick question or a long question?
It's a quick question. Hi, Bryant. I wanted to ask you if you or your colleagues or your company works with K-12 districts.
Thank you, Robin. Excellent question. We do not work directly with K-12 districts. We're mostly focused on the government side. I would say if you're looking to find added security for K-12 districts, to find there's definitely in terms of the government providing training, definitely something to bring up to your chain of command. I wish I had a better answer to give for you. I'm not too familiar with the K-12 system personally from experience, but I can imagine they have to have their own protocol security. Start off by reaching out to your local help desk and branching from there.
Okay, thanks.
We thank you very much, Bryant. We have a certificate of service that we'll mail to you if you give us a good mailing address. The old-fashioned, and a password too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been great.
Thank you, everybody.